What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 40K Cafe, and thank you, Steel Shanks, for the request. Unfortunately for Malcador, we can't hear too much more about him. As we all know, he was too busy turning into dust on the Emperor's palace floor. But in all seriousness, he once was part of the ancient order known as the Sigillites, and he is the last remaining survivor of this order, seeing as he is or was a perpetual. And perpetuals themselves are these immortal creatures or beings, with the most common reputation being that if they are unalived, they will tend to come back to life, such as Vulcan. The Emperor is also a perpetual. And in one of my other videos, as you can see here, I went into greater detail about the other perpetuals. But one thing I didn't cover that although perpetuals are these very powerful creatures, their power tends to vary between each individual. As we know, the Emperor of Mankind was the greatest psyker the Imperium has to offer, with Malcador and Magnus probably being right behind him. That being said though, Malcador was a perpetual and Magnus is not. But not every perpetual will have the same type of psychic power that they did. John Grammaticus is a perfect example. Although he was genetically engineered to become a perpetual and did have psychic abilities, they were nowhere near in comparison as to that of Malcador or the Emperor. Although every perpetual is capable of reincarnation, it doesn't mean that they are incapable of being unalived. It just has to be through very specific means, more often than not, through some kind of overwhelming power that over-encompasses the abilities of the perpetual. I've mentioned it before, but a good example is when Malcador sat on the Golden Throne, the power was too much. And this is exactly what led him to needing to be feather dusted. But then there's also the Fulgurite Spear, an ancient relic said to hold a portion of the Emperor's divine power that, when placed in the right hands, is strong enough and capable enough to unalive a perpetual. Lastly, perpetuals are few and far between. We tend to see them a lot during the Horus Heresy, but I feel like that was just for the sake of the story. But now in more recent lore, we don't see them that often. The Emperor is too busy gathering dust. Vulcan is off playing the greatest game of hide and seek. Erda was last unalived by Erebus. John Grammaticus lost his abilities of reincarnation as a perpetual. Daemon Praetanus was unalived with a shard of the Fulgurite Spear. Alania's Person was turned into paste by the War Master. And I've made the joke enough, you know exactly where Malcador is. There's a handful more, but you get the point. There aren't exactly a lot of them. Some of these were either born a perpetual or created into one, but to do so is extremely difficult and costly, which is why you don't necessarily see so many running around. But that being said, feel free to check out my video on the perpetuals here, or my deep dive video on Malcador the Sigillite here, to answer any greater questions that aren't just overgeneralization. So Steel, thanks again for the request, and I hope that helped. Drop a comment, guys, if there's anything you want to hear about next, and as always, remember to follow for more.